Everybody. Yeah, I'm Avik. Um, Pleasure to be here. Let me share my screen. Okay, can you all see?
Yes.
All right. Yeah. No. Once again, thank you all for your time. I was listening to all the introductions, and a lot of you, physicians, doctors, researchers. Feel very humbled to be here. I'm just an engineer. I feel very passionate about clinical trials and the life sciences industry, and hopefully looking to make an impact through technology and data science. I'm based in Fremont, California. So to get started, I think the topic of today's discussion very relevant and close to some of the things that we also kind of envision. There's healthcare and there's life sciences, right? But we see there's a big firewall in between, right? Here we call hospitals, here we call sites, here we call doctors, here we call PI, here we call patients, here we call subjects. And here we have EMR, here we have EDC. So why so, right? And that actually makes it very difficult for many of these, hospital centers or sites to actually participate in trials. And that's something we need to, work on. I think and today we'll probably hear a lot about that. There's a lot of kind of challenges in this industry, the license industry, and hopefully we can bridge some of those. Population participants in clinical trials, right? So in other words, we have not been able to tap into 95% of the population to participate in clinical trials. These 95% of the population is served by lots of doctors and physicians, independent networks of research centers and stuff. But they hardly get to participate in the trials. Most of the trials are actually done at very high-end hospitals in big cities. For example, let's say Stanford, right? It's a site. Now, people who participate in those trials are all who live nearby, right? Within the neighborhood and stuff. So, and that segment is not a very representative segment, right? High net worth individuals, very good lifestyle, good food habits, but if you go further up, you will probably find a lot of African American population. If you go south, you'll probably find a lot of Hispanic population, but they're not represented in these trials. The sites out there are not actually included, right? So I think one thing we want to do is basically bring that wider outreach and the diversity in the clinical trials, and that will eventually help in the long run. So 90% of the drugs fail. We all know that, only 10 succeed, right? So there are many reasons for these failures. Representation is one of them, but probably a big one. So the other thing, is that high touch industry, right? So, the doctor needs to feel the heart, feel the pulse, it's a very high touch industry. Now that's not going to go away. I mean, we definitely need to do that, but at the same time, COVID has pose this as a challenge, right? So I think it's a good time or segue for technology to kind of figure out a way to help out, right? So I mean, the healthcare industry has traditionally been very traditional and manual, paper-based, and all that stuff. But I think gradually the mainstream life sciences and healthcare industry is embracing technology, embracing telemedicine. And these are all interconnected, right? So this telemedicine and other things as technology, as they get accepted in the mainstream, it will help in bringing that diversity, right? So it will help in running virtual clinical trials. We hear a lot about that. Now, if you run virtual clinical trials, you will actually start getting all that heterogeneous mix of subject population, right? So from these remote parts of the country, remote parts of the world, people can participate, patients can participate. And the sites can all be part of the network of clinical trials. Right? So that's, I think, how eventually we will probably see this evolving. So moving on, so these are, currently we're supporting a lot of trials, about more than 20, 25 countries, many across the US. A lot of the sites also, not the mainstream, metro cities, kind of remote as well. We're supporting trials in more than 15 countries in Africa alone. These are geographies that are very difficult to run trials, right? So but we've been able to do so, and that too in a very compliant and completely digital way, completely paperless way. So that helps in terms of bringing those efficiencies and optimizations. We ran trials with small 25 patient single sites to as large as 25,000 patients in a multi-country global trial. So very scalable system, easy to do. Now, how we do that? So, earlier I was talking about, this a lot of, differences between the healthcare and the life science in terms of how they perceive. But I think the two has to eventually map, right? Merge somewhere. There's a lot of, siloed applications right now to run one single trial, right? So we call them, EDC, EPRO, EICF, and it's too many acronyms. But what it does, it makes it difficult for independent researchers to actually, get over that hump that, hey, I have to deal with so many things, I have to deal with so many, technologies, platforms, databases, and how do we talk to each other? So they shy away, right? So, and we have a patented system where we kind of shifted it, where we have a single unified database, a single platform, all configurations are done at one place, and we have decoupled the data collection from the data management, right? So data collection is actually for the sites. So we have a site app. So similarly, if there's data collection from home, we have a patient app. And then all these data goes to the same single database, as you can see here. And then the researchers can actually tap into that data to do their research, electronic data collection, EDC, ePro data, or informed consent, autocoder, randomization. So all those kind of follow through from there. So what that does is it makes it much more easier by decoupling, much more easier for the sites or the independent doctors and physicians, this network of sites, to seamlessly collect their data. And research kind of happens as a byproduct, right? You do your clinical care, but along the way you keep collecting the data, which is also repurposed for research, right? So that's kind of eventually the goal is that how can we make that happen? So see, when you design a technology, right, a software, if it seems to happen seamlessly as if it's not noticed and stuff, that's probably the best innovation, right? You don't have to do much about it, it just happens. So I think eventually the byproduct of healthcare will actually help in a lot of ways with that data to run research. So wanted to kind of share how we are leveraging that to the decentralized trials, the virtual trials. So there are 4 ways in post-COVID that we've seen we're collecting data. One is, patient is coming to the hospital and the nurse is collecting the data. 2 is patient is coming to the hospital, getting admitted, and then themselves collecting the data. 3 is, we go further and to additional nodes where at each home, patient can collect their data themselves. Not only that, nurses can go to patient home and collect the data. So there's a lot of these permutations, combinations, but you don't need 10 different systems to do that. A single unified system can help. Now, at the hospitals, we've done a lot of these optimizations with integrations, labs, and EMRs and other systems, and that can funnel that data. And for home, there's a lot of connected devices that makes it seamless. They all come back to the same portal that you just saw, the unified platform. And because all the data is digital and we have all these checks and balances at the beginning to ensure we collect clean data, we can do a lot of data science on top, right? And then for the sponsors and CROs, you get a unified view of all that data. I also want to touch quickly about something that we're doing with a big pharma. This is data collection from patient home. It's about a breathing analyzer. And when you breathe, every person's breathing pattern is different, right? So let's say I breathe, that's my normal breathing. Now, somebody else may breathe a little differently, but very difficult to find naked eye. Now, the machine learning actually recognizes these patterns, and suddenly, if all of a sudden I start breathing, grasping for breath, then the analytics platform captures that as a deflection in the pattern and triggers a notification that something is wrong, right? Could be a heart attack or could be a stroke or something like that, and they need to be intervened right away. So these kind of technologies now give the option to actually intervene right away. And hopefully, a life can be saved. So these, these things, the decentralized trial, leveraging these technologies, bringing artificial intelligence and data science, device integrations, all of these are now at our fingertips. It's been there, but it was not really, in the mainstream. But post-COVID, I think there's a lot of, emphasis and trigger on that, which is a good thing for the industry. And hopefully, we will see a lot more data play going forward. Moving forward.
1 minute, Avik.
Sure. Also wanted to highlight that it was designed with all the stakeholders in mind. So as I said, for the patients, you have a patient tab from home. For the sites, there's a site tab for the hospitals, CROs, and also the sponsors. Compliance by design, so took care of that. And along the way, we got quite a few tractions and recognitions. So I'll pause here and open to questions. Thank you.
Great presentation, Avik. So one thing I got confused, are you trying to diagnose if there is a medical emergency is happening, or you just want to collect those data for research purposes? Because those are two different things being monitored by two different set of people.
Correct.
And before you answer that, I will tell all our audiences to if you can put your question in the chat box, I can quickly pass it on to Avik. Thank you.
So thanks, Braj. I think that was a good question. Our primary focus was to ensure
I can't hear you.
collecting data more in the binders.
Your connection is bad, Avik.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can go ahead now. I can hear you, I think.
Sorry, okay. Yeah, and so I think there's these inefficiencies, right? Binders, folders, cupboards, a lot of real estate in the doctor's hospital taken up. So those are the things that can be seamlessly avoided with technology. So clean data collection is a starting point. But once you collect clean data, there's a lot of analytics that you can build on top, right? So data collection is one part of the problem, which is both at the sites and at the patient home. The other part of the problem is once you collect this data, what can you do with the data, right? So there are a lot of analytics play and data science play. So those are the things that we built, and these are custom, development for cardiac trials. There's different for CNS trials is something else. We are also doing something with maternity and child health, where pregnant women's data points are collected, and the technology actually predicts how many of or who of them have a tendency for premature delivery, right? So these AEs and SAEs can be avoided, where doctor pays extra care to those who are kind of outside in that outlier with a higher chance of getting premature delivery. You're again muted, brother.
Christine, you had a question. You want to introduce yourself and give your question?
Sure. Christine von Reisfeld, and like I said, I'm looking into the data on patients and eventually going towards that belief that patients will own their own data. So I want to know, where's the data that you collect going to be stored, and who's going to have the proprietary rights to that data?
Right. Excellent question. And there's a lot of it's very sensitive as well. But I mean, currently the way the industry works is the sites collect the data and they own the data. Sponsors own the de-identified data, only the clinical data, not the PHI data. So the system that we have developed, it's all access control based and rule based, right? So we can mask the data, we can deactivate data, we can redact the data for patient signatures, for example, for informed consent. But when the somebody else will look at it outside of the site, they will see a redacted version of the signature, but they will see the timestamp and geolocation. So they know that when it was done and who did it. So that data whole part can be addressed in that context. But at the end of the day, when the study is over, the data is each site gets both the PHI and clinical data. So each of those sites get their own, and the sponsors and CROs get only the clinical data across all the sites.
And does the patient get a copy of this data at all? Because what I'm looking at exploring is an API-based platform for integration of any type of genetic test or multi-omic or IoT data. That's going to be a platform where the patient owns the data, and then I have all rights to, distribute my data as I see needed if I want to gift it or whatever. So where does that fall with where I'm working?
Right. So, so in our case, we have a patient tab. There's a patient portal. So the patient has full access to their to his or her own data for the entire duration of the trial. Right. So at the end of the day, though, once this trial is over, they still go back to the sites who are responsible for or who recruited that patient in the trial. But I think some of those are actually getting more democratized, and patient owning that data is becoming becoming more and more, norm going forward. I mean, we all own our own data, right? And we decide, if we want to give this data access to somebody else for research and other things through our, healthcare system. So I think going forward, we'll see more of those.
Yeah, I'm working with a company that's working on it now. So they're looking at actually marketing to